Today is March 19th, and it's going to be a day that everyone remembers. This is Women's History Month, and we're going to try to make history for women here at the Rhode State House. Behind me is a coalition made up of labor, community, faith, representatives, and business who all believe that 10% of Rhode Island's population has been left behind and needs to be part of our society totally. Currently, tipped workers are only paid $2.89 an hour. They face rates of discrimination and harassment that is the highest of any industry in the country. They use almost $700,000 worth of food assistance in Rhode Island, and they suffer rates of poverty 1.5 times that of other industries. This is something that a society that cares about people cannot be let happen. Maureen Martin, the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL, always posts at the end of her emails, she says, "It is in the shelter of each other that we all live." This coalition is providing shelter and protection for the women who can be intimidated when they come to speak, who can be too frightened because of retribution, and can be too fragile to actually come forward. So these people behind me are lending their voices. So we're going to go through our speakers really quickly. I would like to invite Representative Theresa Reidenberg to come speak to the issue. I introduce the bill sponsor, Anna Reidenberg, first, and then Jill Golden in second. Thanks.
Hello, as Mike said, my name is Aaron Reidenberg, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. I'm very excited to be here today to welcome the many coalition partners who have joined together to say that 20 years is long enough and the time has come to raise Rhode Island's sub-minimum wage. I think it's valuable to start this conversation with a little historical context. In 1996, when I was just 6 years old, the regular minimum wage in Rhode Island was $4.45 an hour, and the tip minimum wage was $2.89 an hour. Today, nearly 20 years later, the regular minimum wage is $9 an hour, and the tip minimum wage is still just $2.89 an hour. That translates into real hardships for a lot of Rhode Islanders who face frequent instability and economic insecurity. According to the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics report, the average hourly wage, including gratuities, for tip workers in Rhode Island is $8.90. As Mike said, tip workers have higher poverty rates and are twice as likely to be on food stamps as non-tip workers in our state. That's the reality. And that's why Senator Golden and I have introduced legislation in the House and the Senate that would provide a measure of added security to thousands of hardworking Rhode Islanders by gradually raising the sub-minimum wage, starting with a bump to $4.50 in 2016. Now, I could go on and on, but we have a lot of folks here today who bring a number of diverse perspectives on this issue. So I will pause here to let others discuss why they think it's so critical that the General Assembly pass this legislation. Thanks again.
And with that, we're announcing the formal formation of the One Fair Wage Coalition. Now I'd like to invite Senator Golden to say a few words about it.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here, and it is incredible to see the coalition of people who are joining Representative Reidenberg and I in ensuring that some of our lowest wage workers in the state are seeing a raise for the first time in 20 years. When I first learned that we had been raising the minimum wage without also addressing the tip minimum wage, I was a little bit surprised and started researching it. And one of the things that I came across was research from the National Women's Law Center that talked about how this is actually also about the gender wage gap, because we are creating an institutionalized difference in our minimum wage, because so many women make up the majority of tipped workers in our state and across the country. I'm delighted that there are people here who are advocating on behalf of tip workers and have come together for the first time really to talk about this issue. I know for myself that I've never once thought that when I was leaving somebody a tip, it was what was going to actually pay their rent or put food in their child's mouth. It was my way of saying thank you for great service. What I think we really need to realize is that when we put more money in people's pockets, our economy keeps going. And this is a way to ensure that more people in the state have more money in their pockets, can buy those groceries, pay rent, and ensure that their kids are well cared for. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to all of our coalition members for joining us.
It's vital that we remember that solidarity is a central principle of everything we do. And with that, George Nee is probably the best expression of that. So I'd love if George Nee came up and said a few words about this.
We are very proud to be a part of this coalition. On behalf of the Rhode Island AFLCIO, we have been fighting for years to raise the minimum wage. It has been unfortunate that that has not applied to the men and women who work very hard in the hospitality industry and depend on tipped wages. We believe that there is tremendous abuse where people in some cases don't know that they have a right to the minimum wage and should be paid the minimum wage by their employer if they don't make it as a result of the tips. And we are firmly committed that there has to be economic justice and social justice for everybody. This group has essentially worked in the shadows of our economy. It's about time that they are brought out into the sunlight of our economy, and the sun is out today, which is very nice for a change. And we are committed to make sure, again, that in our state, economic justice applies to everybody. So with that, again, we're proud to be part of this coalition, and let's move forward. Thank you.
I'm not really very proud of me. We've heard from labor, we've heard from reps, but I think it would be helpful if we heard from the business community. So I'd like to invite Andy Posner from the Capital Good Fund to speak a few words about this issue.
Thank you. So I'm the founder and CEO of Capital Good Fund, and we're a nonprofit that does financial services for low-income families, including one-on-one financial health coaching and small loans. And as such, I think about this in terms of a budget. So when we sit down with a family, and we do this all the time, and we see that they make $2.89 an hour plus tips, we can't do an accurate budget because we don't know how much they're going to bring in. Some weeks they bring in enough, some weeks they don't. And as a result, they have to resort to high-interest loans. They have to resort to pawning their items. They have to resort to going to friends and family or doing without. This isn't just a moral issue, it's an economic one, as has been mentioned before. Our families that we work with don't have savings, they don't have bank accounts, they don't have good credit, and it's because of their financial instability, the lack of a secure income that they can budget. If they know how much they're going to make, they can invest in the local economy, they can invest in themselves, they can invest in their families. So by getting rid of the two-tiered wage system, we can then sit down with families to build budgets that make sense for them, for the families, and for the state. Thank you.
It's important that we make sure that everyone's voice gets heard. So I'd like to invite Meg Fosk of Restaurant Opportunity Centers United to come speak to this issue.
So first I want to thank Representative Reidenberg, Senator Golden, and Representative Williams for their leadership on this issue. What an inspiring coalition, an inspiring group of people that we've built. This is an issue whose time has come. An entire classification of the workforce should not be left out of earning a fair minimum wage. The sub-minimum wage for tipped workers of $2.89 creates poverty and it creates inequality. It's justified based on a myth that tipped workers are earning so much, servers, bussers, runners, and bartenders earn so much in tips that it more than makes up for the fact that they earn a base wage of just $2.89 an hour. For the vast majority, that's just not true. Tipped workers live in poverty at nearly 2 times the rate of the rest of the workforce here in Rhode Island and rely on food stamps at double the rate. Now think about that for a second. That means that the people that put food on our tables in restaurants often can't afford to put food on their tables at home. Now, because the vast majority of tipped workers are women, about 70%, this poverty burden falls on them. The sub-minimum wage for tipped workers is in effect a legislated pay inequity for a female workforce. Women who are mothers, many of them single mothers, and rely on tips that fluctuate based on shift, based on time of day, based on weather, to support themselves and their families. And it's not just an economic issue, because when you force a female workforce to rely on tips for their income, what they have to do is curry favor from customers in order to make a living. And what this does is exacerbates already the highest levels of sexual harassment in any industry. Because the customer's always right, so whatever inappropriate touches or comments the customer makes, the server has to put up with, because it's a choice between making a living and standing up for yourself. Now, there's a pretty easy solution to this. It's not a radical solution, it's something that's in existence in 7 states in the United States right now. One fair wage, the same minimum wage for all workers, tipped and non-tipped. Over 1 million workers on the entire West Coast and Nevada are already working under this system. And you know what? Not surprisingly, tipped workers are doing better. Lower poverty rates, lower gender wage gap, lower race wage gap. But you know what? Businesses are too. In these states where the minimum wage is the same for tipped and non-tipped workers, there's higher per capita sales in the restaurant industry, higher employment growth in the restaurant industry, and within the classification of tipped workers, and menu prices are not higher on average. It's time for one fair wage here in Rhode Island. It's time that all workers are guaranteed a fair minimum wage under the law. Thank you.
We've heard from many advocates of raising the tip minimum wage, but now let's hear from one of the workers. I'd like to introduce Kate Conroy.
Hi, my name is Kate. I'm a 31-year-old mother and a bartender and server with over 10 years of experience in the city of Providence. The sub-minimum wage is not a livable wage. It's a poverty wage. Tipped workers, like myself, are more likely to live in poverty and much more likely to be women. Sub-minimum wage workers, like me, do have families. The cost of living in this city rises, but our pay doesn't, and it hasn't in 20 years. Unpredictable wages have many invisible problems. It's much harder to get credit, and it's hard to get an apartment when you don't show reliable income. And there's lots of unpredictability. The managers whose whim it is which shifts you will get. Maybe it's the same superior whose managerial work you might be doing for free. Or the unpredictable weather around here. When it snows or storms, how do you pay a babysitter that day? How much work will you do when you're not making tips? But maybe you're cleaning or managing for $2.89 an hour. Raising the sub-minimum wage would lift not only service workers out of poverty, but it would empower people raising families like myself and living in a city that's so proud of its hospitality industry to participate in the economy. I think that it's time that professional servers, bartenders, and other workers laboring for $2.89 an hour to finally get a raise. Thank you.
Again, it's always important to note that when a worker steps up to speak, they're facing retaliation and they can be facing new harassment. It takes a unique courage for people to stand up sometimes. So with that, I'd like to invite Jen Steinfeld.
Steinfeld, and I'm the executive director of the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. And as many people have already mentioned today, this is a women's issue, with nearly 3 in 4 of the tip workers in the state of Rhode Island being women, with many of them being mothers. This is a childhood poverty issue, and frankly, it's a social justice issue as well. So we're here because we don't want to see anything happen to women who want to speak up on behalf of their own wages. And we want to lend our voice to this coalition in support of an increase to the tip minimum wage. We believe that this is a way to level the playing field for women in our state. And we know that from other states that have eliminated the sub-minimum wage, the gender wage gap has also declined. So we're strong supporters of this coalition, and we're happy to be part of the One Fair Wage Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Again, it's advocates that come forward that do so much, but it's also the workers that this is about. So I'd like to invite a fine dining server and a very, very courageous man, Joe Fortune, to speak to the issue.
Thank you for everyone that showed up today. It is a real honor to have the opportunity to speak. As a server, I usually just listen, but my mother, as a single mother, raised myself and my brother while working at Hemingway's and Spats when I was a kid, so she kind of taught me everything I needed to know about working hard in the restaurant industry. But my goal here is really to dispel the myth that people that work in fine dining are just making a killing and, like, you know, saving money and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just because someone has a big table one time, that means they probably also had another shift where they might not have made minimum wage that day. And I would say if you really looked at what servers in fine dining make, even the best ones sometimes go home without making minimum wage that day. And most of them are mothers and fathers and things like that. I just want to dispel the myth that we're not all college kids just making some extra allowance or something. It's people raising families, and we should get at least minimum wage at the end of the day. Thank you.
Again, the value of this is going to be lifting people out of poverty. This is really a jobs program. This is really a way to step forward in a state where we're leaving people behind. Again, the business community is on board with us, and I'd like to ask Ashley Schofield to come forward and speak.
Thank you all for being here, and thank Representative Reidenberg and Representative Golden for putting this conversation out there for us all to have. My name is Ashley Schofield. I've owned and operated a business in Providence for 14 years. I also co-founded the Hope Street Merchants Association 9 years ago. And I just wanted to speak about my feelings on the topic of raising the minimum wage for tip workers. I think this is going to be good for business. For me, I'm a business that is dependent on people having money, having capital in their pockets to spend and to support their local economy in this fashion. I can see a substantial increase in the tip workers' minimum wage affecting my business's fourth quarter significantly, and other businesses as well. So I think that just to counter any potential arguments about this having a negative impact on businesses, I see this as being very positive. In addition to owning a business, I also have some experience having been a server in the past. 20 years ago, I was not 6 years old as Aaron was. I was a recent college graduate, and I was a server. I've actually never really told anybody this before, but it was a really hard income for me to be making. I worked at a cafe, mainly doing lunch shifts, and it was hard for me to pay my bills. This was 20 years ago. The same amount of money I was making then, people are making today. And I just can't quite wrap my head around that. At that time, I was having a hard time making my rent, I was having a hard time buying my groceries. I defaulted on my student loans. I ruined my credit, and it took me 7 years to rebound from that. I'm here today, gratefully, as a business owner who was able to weather that storm. And I can't imagine making that same minimum today, much less having a family that depended on me and needing to support young ones in my household. I think this is a very serious issue that we're here to address today. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation and that we're hearing from these brave people who are able to speak up and support this. And I'm proud to be able to do that as well. And so just to reiterate, let's look at this. Let's have this discussion. Let's look at other states who have done this already. What has the impact been there? Have the businesses folded because the tipped worker minimum wage went up? Or is their economy showing good positive signs since doing that? I can see positivity coming out of this in Rhode Island, and I'd like to encourage you all to support this bill. Thank you very much.
So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. I just want to add a couple of things. That every wage increase that's happened historically has always been treated as if the sky was going to fall. But the reality was that it was a rising tide that lifted every boat. We need to make sure that all of the workers of Rhode Island are included in our recovery and included in growth. And that's why I'm urging everyone to support the One Fair Wage Coalition. Thank you.